Hi, welcome to Coaster Mania. I'm Micah, and today I'm going to give you my thoughts and opinions on Busch Gardens, Tampa. I need to start this review off by saying that going to this park was not in our original plans. We had intended to go to Six Flags Magic Mountain, but due to some changes in their operating season, we had to shift what we were doing. Regardless, we still had a lot of fun at this park, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Busch Gardens Tampa was the sixth park that Katie and I visited together. We went during the 2022 Christmas Town event and got to see what that was like compared to a similar event at Knott's Berry Farm from the previous year. I'll say it here, there will probably be some heavier bias towards this park because of the fact that our original plans fell through. We can't help it that Six Flags Magic Mountain used to be a year-round park. Heck, when planning this trip, we looked on the Six Flags website and saw that they only had the schedule set up to November. So we called in to ask about that. We were rudely told by their customer service that Six Flags is open 365 days a year, of course it will be open. And what would you know? It was changed from being open every day to only being open Fridays through Mondays, when our trip was going to be Monday through Friday.
That's a problem.
We had to rebook a lot and ended up spending less time than we would have preferred at this park. All of that is to say that going into this trip, we were already not in the greatest of moods. Based on its name alone, you can already figure out where this park got its start. Busch Gardens Tampa was opened in 1959 by Anheuser-Busch, the beer company. Originally, there were just gardens included on site with what started out as a large brewery. These gardens housed a variety of animals as part of its experience. Today, it's considered a notable amusement park experience that many people recommend trying out. If you're familiar with my reviews, you'll recognize the structure I'm using. I'll be breaking up my opinions into 10 sections. I'll go through first impressions, theming, immersion, layout, amenities, food, staff, coasters, flat rides, and finally operations. To tie everything together, I'll crunch the numbers and give an average score. Busch Gardens Tampa has this interesting feel to it. Based on the front entrance alone, this park feels quite grand. There's a lot of good theming around, and it sets up a lot in the way of expectations. Walking around the park, things were clean and well taken care of. Something that Katie did make sure to point out, however, was the welfare of the animals. They didn't necessarily look unhealthy, but they also looked fairly miserable. In fact, in one exhibit with a lion, there were markings on the ground in almost a circle shape where you could see that the lion actively walked around in that same pattern, just kind of aimlessly. I don't figure this is behavior exhibited by healthy or happy animals. Some of the other exhibits were fine, but they left a lot to be desired. The park had a lot of fun theming around the place and some minimal things for the winter event, so it wasn't all bad. One thing I should mention, however, was their light tunnel they had in the middle of the park. On social media, Busch Gardens was promoting this for the Christmas event and made it seem like it was going to be this really cool thing that you just had to see. In reality, it looked like a somewhat hastily put together plastic tunnel with some lights slapped on it just for people to look cool on Instagram for 5 minutes. It felt very corporate-y, if that's a word.
Checks out.
Overall, I'd give the first impressions an 8 out of 10. This park has a history of incorporating theming into its rides fairly well. It's somewhat similar to the theming of rides at Dollywood. There are some rides that have a lot of it, like Cobra's Curse, and there are some that have none or very little, like Iron Gwazi. Ultimately, most of the theming on the rides here doesn't go very far beyond the station theming. Some rides have good landscaping around them, like Cheetah Hunt, but others, like Kumba, are a little bare. The park itself has lots of themed areas that look fairly decent, and there are a couple areas that feel slightly unfinished. One of these would be on the southwest corner of the park. There is the separating wall which divides the park land from the outside world, and then some trees sporadically placed around. There isn't room for much over here, so I'm not sure exactly what the park could do to improve things, but it is somewhat interesting to find that things just feel slightly inconsistent. Arguably, one of the best areas of the park is the Pantopia area near Scorpion and Sand Serpent. This area is the most thorough with the African theming. Many parts of the rest of the park have some nice theming around rides, but then other buildings like restaurants are completely different. The best example of this would be the area between the entrance of Cheetah Hunt and Cobra's Curse. This whole area is poised as an Egyptian-themed area, but then you have this random colonial-style building in the middle. This building isn't bad-looking or unkempt, it's just out of place.
Unacceptable!
Overall, I'd give the theming an 8.5 out of 10. The immersion at this park is, for the most part, pretty good. Aside from the emptiest part of the park in the southwest corner, most of the park does a fairly good job of keeping you immersed in its theming. There isn't a whole lot of views outside the park except when you're on the taller rides, which can briefly give you a fairly open view outside the park. But any other aspects of each ride that is not up high do a good job of surrounding you with decent landscaping and theming. There are parts near the back end of SheiKra that let you see into the maintenance warehouse area and employee parking lot, but for the most part, this is hidden from guest view. Overall, I'd give the immersion an 8 out of 10. The layout of this park is like a big circle with a couple other bits sticking out. The circular layout surrounds the middle, which is populated with maintenance buildings. Granted, this makes sense when putting the land owned by the park into consideration. This park is completely locked in with development on all sides. They certainly wouldn't want to put anything on the outskirts or the corners of the park, right? Technically, no, they couldn't. This park is packed with ride maintenance warehouses and animal care facilities, and Busch Gardens has done a decent job at utilizing most of their available space. There is still a decent amount of unused land in and around the park, so I'd be interested to see what they might consider doing with this. Our outlook on the layout of this park is a bit biased due to the fact that so much of this park was closed when we went, so let's take that into consideration. Since we went during the winter event, a walkway behind the log ride and Scorpion was closed off so they could open it late at night for the Tunnel of Lights. This one path being closed meant that we had to take a fairly lengthy detour around just to get to that same area. There were a few other areas of the park that were somewhat like this. Around Iron Gwazi and SheiKra, there is a large maintenance area. I feel like it would be nice if there was some way they could incorporate a path or two crossing between these areas to give guests an easier way across the park. Because this isn't here, most of the park feels like it's divided into two halves, with the northern half being somewhat far away and completely out of the way of just about everything else. Overall, I'd give the layout a 7.5 out of 10. The amenities at this park were, for the most part, fairly good. In some parts of the park, there is a pretty decent lack of shade, but then the rest of the park does a good job at providing plenty of shade. This was really important since our last day at the park was met with a pretty severe thunderstorm. There was tons of rain and not really a whole lot of places to hide. For the rest of the park, there are plenty of restroom facilities around, a fair amount of restaurants and gift shops, and plenty of locker space. The park wasn't insanely busy when we went, but there was a moderate amount of people there. The paths were wide enough to accommodate the crowds, and we didn't have to go too far out of our way to find exactly what we needed. Overall, I'd give the amenities an 8.5 out of 10. So you know how I like healthy food? You know how I enjoy not feeling sick to my stomach after eating theme park food? Busch Gardens doesn't know. If you are a huge fan of chicken tenders, pizza, fries, barbecue, or burgers, you'll be happy here. If you like anything but that, well, sorry. There isn't much in the way of good food options here. Sure, most of it tasted fine, but one of these days, major theme parks are gonna have to learn that we need more healthy options. You hear me, SeaWorld Entertainment? Yes, I will pay $12 for a mediocre salad. I will pay for overpriced poke bowls. Or heck, even well-balanced food like wraps or anything healthy. I'm curious as to when this paradigm shifts since the broader world has sort of switched to a more health-minded outlook on food. People just care at least a little bit more about what they're putting into their bodies. Overall, I'd give the food a 4 out of 10. Yeah, remember that reward I gave to Carowinds? Well, Busch Gardens, I now give you the Definitely Not Gourmet award. Take good care of it, and congrats. The staff at this park gave us a bit of a mixed bag experience. We had a lot of good interactions and a couple of weird ones too. For one, when we were stuck in the storm on the last day, we were able to go to the park and ask some of the ride operators if we could come onto the ride platforms and take some pictures. These rides were closed and we were following all the rules they asked us to follow. The opportunity for us to do this was really cool. We got to talking to some of these staff members and each of them was genuinely nice and accommodating to us. One weird experience we had was when we walked over to the Iron Gwazi ride platform. We walked up to the front of the line and asked the ride attendant if we could go up to the ride platform. Mind you, it was still raining and we still had our backpack on. We explained that we had asked 2 other ride-op crews if we could do this, and both said yes. The staff member proceeded to tell us that we could, but we couldn't have our bags with us and we had to put them in lockers. His reasoning was that we could be terrorists. I understand parks have their own rules, but this one came out of left field. This meant that we had to pay extra money and secure these items in a locker while we went up to take pictures. Now, look, I have a sense of humor, and if he was joking when he said this, I totally would have laughed it off. But it wasn't a joke. It felt really odd to almost be accused of potentially being a terrorist with our cameras. This was just a one-off experience, but it still stuck with us. A lot of the other staff we saw, such as other ride-ops, didn't seem crazy enthused to be where they were. Like I mentioned earlier, it was a mixed bag experience, but things trended more positively. Overall, I'd rate the staff an 8 out of 10. The coasters at this park are arguably the main draw for a lot of people. This park is stacked with a great collection of rides. There isn't the largest quantity of rides, but there is an overall large selection of them. From the weakest being their kiddie coaster and Wild Mouse to their strongest being Iron Gwazi, this park has a lot to offer in this way. Many of the coasters have strong layouts and feature a good variety of forces and elements. There's the spinning experience of Cobra's Curse, there's the launch experience of Tigress and Cheetah Hunt, there's the airtime focused Iron Gwazi, and finally, there's the inversion focused Matu and Kumba. There isn't much negative to say about the coasters here. I just wish there was more. Some people would rate Iron Gwazi as their #1 coaster over Steel Vengeance. Let's just say that I'm not some people. Fight me, bro.
Just do it!
Oh, and it should be mentioned that Shikara was down for scheduled maintenance when we went, so we didn't actually get to experience every coaster at the park. This was a tad bit of a letdown for us. It is great to finally experience another seriously good coaster collection though. There really isn't one bad ride here. Overall, I'd rate the coasters a 9.5 out of 10. Oh boy, this is gonna be a short one.
I have a bad feeling about this.
Every major flat ride at the park was closed when we went. This was the first time I've ever seen this happen at an amusement park, and I was somewhat disappointed. This made half the park feel nearly empty. For a complete coaster nerd, this isn't a huge issue, but for someone who enjoys the whole package of an amusement park experience, this was not a good time. Overall, I'd rate the flat rides a 0 out of 10. This would have been different if they were open, and I know we went during off season, but ouch. So what can I say about the operations here? Well, they were operations. The ride-ops loaded the coasters and dispatched them. Yeah, so let me just put it this way. Iron Gwazi consistently had 5-minute dispatches. Yikes. Busch Gardens, do you have anything to say for yourself?
No problem here, Master Chief.
This was how many rides were. Fortunately, there wasn't much of a crowd, so we didn't actually have to wait too long to get on most rides, but this was kind of painful. Overall, I'd rate the operations a 5 out of 10. We really gotta pick things up, guys. This was somewhat rough.
Yeah, they had us the first half, I'm not gonna lie.
Busch Gardens, I had so much faith in you. I will say that we probably went to this park during the worst time of year and ultimately set ourselves up for failure, but ouch. Try not to take our opinions too personally on this one. We did end up really enjoying our time at this park, but there still was a lot left to be desired. This park does something that is a classic SeaWorld thing: high prices. I know theme parks usually have high markups on food and souvenirs, but SeaWorld parks have historically been a step above. In fact, when we bought some souvenirs, there was a markup on everything due to inflation. To compare prices, a Nano coaster from Six Flags costs $38. One from a Cedar Fair park usually costs $35. So what's the price for a Nano coaster from a SeaWorld park? $50. Oh, and that markup I was talking about? It was labeled as a 5% surcharge. So their base prices are higher, and they tack on extra fees because they feel like it.
Hello, I like money.
See? This change just leaves me with a weird feeling. Let's just move on. Moving through the scores, I gave First Impressions an 8 out of 10, Theming an 8.5 out of 10, Immersion an 8 out of 10, Layout 7.5 out of 10, Amenities 8.5 out of 10, food 4 out of 10, staff 8 out of 10, coasters 9.5 out of 10, flat rides 0 out of 10, and finally operations a 5 out of 10. This all adds up to an average of 6.7 out of 10, a solid D+. I'm sorry for this, guys. There are minor things this park could improve, but some of it comes down to the overall experience. Thank you so much for watching this review of Busch Gardens Tampa. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, feel free to leave a like and comment below and consider subscribing. I intend on uploading more content as time goes on and as Katie and I experience more parks and coasters. You can find daily uploads on our Instagram page at Coaster Mania. Soon we'll be opening an Etsy page where you'll be able to buy prints and more of some of your favorite coaster photography of ours. Thanks for watching the video, and ride on, Coaster Maniacs.